Welcome everybody to the PFF College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Sorry. Welcome everybody to the Too High Podcast. I am Seth Galina alongside, as always, Deontay Lee. Deontay, what's going on?
I'm good, man. I want our producers to please leave that in. Okay, that is a signal of the holiday season if I've ever heard one.
That was a planned bit. While I was waiting for you to get on the call, I planned this whole thing out. What an elaborate and hilarious bit from Mr. Seth Galina once again. Let's talk about football.
Yes.
Well, first of all, happy holidays. Hope you had a good Christmas.
Yes.
I don't celebrate Christmas, therefore I spent time watching football and playing video games, which honestly, I'm sure a lot of people who do celebrate Christmas did as well.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who have to celebrate Christmas traditionally that wish that was their Christmas. Okay.
I am so close to finishing Valhalla. Though I think with all Assassin's Creed games, when you think you're so close to finishing them, there's still like 25 hours left. But let's get into football. I wanted to start with I think probably the biggest game from the Sunday slate was Patriots-Bills. And I think to a certain degree it played out like I thought it would, even though the Patriots had that win on Monday night in the rain. It was such a cultural iconic moment in football this year when they did that. But I still think the Bills are just a better football team. You watched the Patriots defense kind of in detail against the Josh Allen and the Bills. What'd you see?
I mean, honestly, like very typical Patriots defense. Like I don't think that there was really anything broken with what they were doing. There weren't any like coverage busts. They didn't give up that many explosive plays, and most of them were like catch and tackle. There weren't really any there weren't too many of the catch plus 15 plus yards after the catch types of situations. I will say that like this was probably the first week where I think for as good as Matt Judon had been for them all year long, I think that's probably one of the first games where you look and you're like, hey, you remember like when we had an era of just pure speed rush guys that could just get after the quarterback and you don't have to scheme up all this interior pressure to flush quarterbacks certain ways or trying to affect the platform more so than get after the quarterback outright. This is one of those games where that would help. I felt like Josh, we've talked about it too, right? Where when Josh is good at extending plays, when he is hot with extending plays or being able to work through the pocket, there's nothing you can do because they have too much receiving talent and he has too much arm talent. So if it's clean and he still gets to extend, especially against the way that the Patriots want to play defense, there's a lot of zone. Even when they're matching the patterns, they like getting eyes on the quarterback, kind of feeling out routes when they're not in man coverage. That for a quarterback like Josh Allen, if he has the protection, that's right in his wheelhouse. At least it has been when he's been at his best. So that was trouble. But I think the thing to take away is probably more on your side of the ball or your side of the analysis of the game with some of the issues that the Patriots had with moving the football. Because for the most part, I think if you're Bill Belichick and you're evaluating that film defensively, you probably would like to get more takeaways. But we know that turnovers are often more luck than they are skill anyhow, or, the presence of an opportunity, which just wasn't there throughout the course of the game. So I think that there's not much to be upset about as far as the Patriots playing defense. They did what we expected in terms of a lot of zone cover 3. They would show cover 1 and then bail out and get to 2 high safeties and play that cover 2 scheme. They did a good amount of that as well. And all of it looked sound and it worked out pretty well. But hey, man, if the quarterback gets 3.5 seconds when you go cover 2, there's not enough time and there's not enough coverage in the world to fix that. And that's what I think the issue was for them.
Yeah, and sometimes you play against Josh Allen and he beats you. I think,
exactly.
And I kind of think that's what you're saying, to tell you the truth. Like, I think if you can't, we talked about this the whole season, like if you can't get pressure on him and take him down, he has the ability now to throw the ball accurately when he extends plays, right? And that's been one of the changes from, the first 2 years in the league to these last 2 years is like, if you don't get to him, he'll make you pay.
Right.
But, and this is still the issue with Josh Allen, which is like there have been games this year where he hasn't been consistent like he was in 2020. And that's why the Bills are 8-6, or maybe they have 9 wins now. I think they have 9 wins now. and they're still a game away from the division, so they might not win division. So that's really been.
In that way, it's funny that now that I'm thinking about it, he's one of the few quarterbacks that's almost unaffected by the kind of defense you're playing, right? It's really just about how he is playing. Because when he's good, there is no defense for that. No. Outside of what the Steelers did, which is just get an unprecedented amount of interior pressure while also having one of the 5 best edge rushers in the world on your team, right? Like that. If that's your game plan, then fine. You just got to have, Cam and TJ Watt on your team, and not everybody has that combination. So yeah, to your point, like the only hope is pressure. He is in that class of quarterback now, and that's how we have to treat him. Even when it's bad, we have to treat him like that quarterback, because if you're not going to play defense like that, he's probably going to cut you up, even if he's having just a regular day.
Yeah, I think that like he's had his trouble, like specifically versus cover 2, and the Steelers game is one thing, and the Jacksonville game is another one where they had a specific trouble against sim pressures and against cover 2. And yeah, I kind of feel the same way. It's just like you have to treat him like he's going to hit all these throws, and you have to treat him. I mean, we talked about this before with the Buffalo offense. Now, did you see the Patriots kind of try to play them on 1st and 10 like it's a passing down?
I will say the amount of depth that they were getting in some of their zone drops would lead me to say yes. It was clear, and and this is all honestly, this is part of their MO anyways, right? We talked about what they do up front and what that does for you in terms of coverage, because they're trying to eat up so many gaps on the interior with the way that they're setting up their fronts, that, they like that it allows them to play with more depth than I think you would see from most other defenses in terms of even cover 3 and things like that. So I do think that they were playing him more like a pass down, which is how you should treat this offense. I mean, it just does come down to the fact that if you're getting depth, you also have to affect the platform of the quarterback.
Have to, man. Have to.
You have to. It can't, even if it doesn't matter how much depth you get, if the quarterback stays in rhythm, he's the one in control. You're not actually, you might be denying the 35-yard completion, but the quarterback is not out of rhythm for that, because that's an alert, right? Meaning that I'm checking that pre-snap, and if I got the look I want, I take it. If there's anything wrong with it, even 1%, I'm coming off and going to my progression. So they weren't really, denying him his typical rhythm in that way.
I think what I've seen teams do that I've liked is just coming with some sim pressures, coming with some actual blitzes on 1st and 10, and trying to get them behind the sticks as early as possible. I mean, you probably should do that against most teams, but especially against the Bills, because you're living in a world where you're okay if they hand the ball off, because they don't have good enough players in the run game. Correct. The offensive line is not built like that. The running backs are okay players. I don't think they're great at anything. So, you probably want to live in a world where, hey, you might get gashed once in a while against a run play where you're coming with a sim pressure or something. But just to live in a world where you're still getting you're still getting 7 droppers in whatever coverage you want, but you're able to affect the quarterback because you're not just rushing 4. You're not just rushing 4 in a classic rush path. You're coming with something here. Someone's dropping off and
there's
doing
movement.
Weird stuff.
There's some kind of movement happening.
Yeah, exactly. Some sort of movement, and that's probably the best way to beat the Bills right now. Or you just hope that Josh is not he's only 80% or he's only 50%, which again, it has happened this year, and it might cost them a home playoff game, which it would be very.
I was going to say, I mean, the way that they played football for the past month, they may have cost themselves a home playoff game, not by what happened on Sunday, but what happened the 5 weeks prior, right? They had some real struggles, and that's going to be kind of part of the story with the way that they play football. But the fact that they had those struggles, they can still be had. That's the thing that's kind of funny talking about the Bills, right? Is I think that we spend so much time trying to find these big picture takeaways, and a lot of the times it's everything that we've said throughout the year, it still exists. This is a great data point for Buffalo, especially doing it on the road. But the way I feel about them has not fundamentally changed. They can still be beaten the exact same ways that they could have been beaten, 3 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago or 10 weeks ago for that matter.
The Patriots have the Jaguars and the Dolphins. So and so there's no reason to believe that they won't win out those two games.
Right.
And then they win a division, and then I believe they're still ahead by a game. I'm not making this up. I have to make sure, but I believe they're still ahead by a game before we. This is
While you're looking that up, I will say while you're typing that and we're vamping for a bit. So I looked at the numbers. Throughout the season, New England has played with split safeties on about 30% of their first down snaps. It was up to like just under 40 against the Bills. So again, to that point, like yes, you're treating those like passing downs more times than not. If you're facing off against the Josh Allen.
Okay, so they're both at 9-6. I thought there was still a game between them. So both at 9-6. The Bills have the Falcons and the Jets, while like I said, the Patriots have the Jaguars and the Dolphins. So honestly, both teams can win out. You probably expect both teams to win out. And yeah, I guess probably at this point the Bills probably have a better chance of winning the division. That was a huge game for them. So yeah, that kind of changes, but I do think everything we're saying is right. Like it's going to be they're not a usual team. They weren't a usual team last year, but I do think it takes time for it. I don't want to speak for anyone else, actually. I'll tell you, for me, it takes time for me to realize, like, what the hell is going on. You just see this team go out and, like, oh, my God, look at this Bills team. Josh Allen changed and blah, blah, blah. And then you realize like, what they're doing with all the spread stuff they do, with all the 5-man protections they do, how much that strain that puts on Josh Allen. So when he's elite, like he was on Sunday, you're getting a game for the ages, because some of the throws in that game are absolutely sick. But let's move over to the other side of the field, where I think I have more concern with the Patriots going forward. Like I said, you should beat the Jaguars, you should beat the Dolphins going forward, but concern, like now it's like now I'll flip it, because I'll say, well, now they're going to have to go on the road in the playoffs.
Right.
And I think, Mac Jones has not been great the last month, let's say. Started the season pretty well, hasn't been great. I still think he's a solid quarterback. The problem with him is it's probably threefold. They don't do enough to create explosive plays down the field in terms of play design. Now, the play design is like good. I'm not saying the play design is bad. It's just like on a macro level, like are you creating these deep over concepts? Are you creating this? Are you creating that to create explosive plays, which you need in the NFL?
Right.
Mac Jones is not a quarterback to throw. Just trust his receivers one-on-one down the field and throw it. Like get a single high safety, look him off one way and throw the nine to the other side of the field, like Russell Wilson does, like Joe Burrow does. That's not in his game.
Right.
So if everything is within 15 yards, within 20 yards, you have to be super, super stupidly accurate and make good decisions. I do think he's continued to make good decisions. I like his footwork. I like his read, his process in the pocket. I think is very good. He's just been off a little bit this past month. So all of a sudden, like, you have that sail route that they need, that 12-yard out route. They need it. That's a big, quote unquote, big play for them. And he's missing a couple times. And he's putting it behind a receiver a couple times. So, like, you got to be so damn perfect if none of your offense exists beyond, like I said, 15 yards. That's tough, right? He's a rookie quarterback. Like, at the end of the day, he's a rookie quarterback. And I think the third thing is, and this is what I noticed in the Bills game, you see it a little bit in the Colts game as well, man, they don't have a receiver. They don't have a receiver. Like, I'm sorry. Like, the Bills played a ton of man coverage, whether it was cover 2 man or even or single high man, and it's tough for them to get off of getting held. Like, they just can't break off their routes in an efficient manner, I find. You're getting a lot of snaps from N'Keal Harry. He's like, is he a good player? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where he would be at on depth charts for the typical NFL
Yeah.
team. I think that he gets a lot of snaps right now because he is legitimately all that they have.
And so like when you look at him and his body type and what they've been asking him to do recently or throughout the whole season, combined with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, that's a 13 personnel offense, man.
Yes.
It's a 13 personnel offense without a receiver on the field who's a burner. Like, I don't think Kendrick Bourne is a burner. Jacoby Myers is a good underneath player, and I think I really like him as a receiver, but like he's not that type of player. So you have all these possession, quote unquote, type of receivers and tight ends. You just can't. You're finding it hard to create explosive plays. They want to run the ball a lot. They're not good at running the ball. They're like a league average team in terms of like EPA per play running the football.
Right.
And they've been worse this kind of past month and a half or whatever it's been. So, like it's gonna be hard for them to find ways to move the football in the playoffs.
I mean, I'm trying to look now at, some of the man coverage numbers. I will say from the past game, so the Bills played 13 snaps a man. He was 2 of 10 for 27 yards, 1 first down and a pick. And the average depth of target there is 15.7, right? And when I saw that, alarm bells go off. So I started looking at his splits throughout the year. And basically his 3 worst games of the year, the Colts, the Bills, and then the Saints earlier in the season, were the only 3 games where his average depth of target was above 10. What do we know about 2 of those teams, at least, the Bills and the Saints? A lot of tight coverage. And what we saw in the Colts game was a defense that feels very confident in stopping the run because they've been a good run defense all year. And what does that allow you to do? Play tighter in coverage, especially out of your split safety looks. So that to me is like, when you start talking about winning a road playoff game, like you kind of teed this off with, that's where I'm like, all right, we have officially hit the ceiling now in New England. This is a ceiling for them offensively. They will see a lot of man from here on out, especially against the good opponents. The next 2 weeks, I think they'll probably be okay. Coming down to the end, I think that we probably both expect both of these teams to split at absolute worst, and more likely than not, win out.
Yeah. Dolphins are a tough game for the Patriots, I will say. Talking about man-to-man coverage.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to get a ton of that, and you're going to get a ton of pressure looks.
Yeah.
So there is some reason to be concerned if you're a New England fan about whether or not you actually bumped into your ceiling a month before the playoffs started, because that might be where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's just tough for them to really move the football, and I think that this is like, I have no data points to back this up. I just feel like they have a lot of routes especially from like inside position slots and inline tight ends where it takes them a lot of time to get into their break. But it's not like, okay, well, I'm going to run play action and then we're going to take the shot on a deep over. So yeah, we have to wait for the deep over. That's why we suck in the linebacker. It's like drop back passing. Tight end is running this like super inside stem up the field to break out to the sail route. And it's like, that is taking a lot of time. And if it's man and you can't, and now you're waiting, now you're the quarterback and you're waiting. And he does a good job of saying like sometimes like, yeah, well, I'll just check it down early and we'll go get 6 yards because I can't wait on this fucking thing anymore.
Right.
And it's tough for them. And it's like, that's where you need just one like man beating outside receiver at some point. Because I like Jacoby Myers. He's good. He plays, I think, in the Edelman Welker type of role for them, and he's an okay player, and Hunter Henry can get off of some coverages. Jonnu Smith's been pretty invisible, I find. But then other than that, it's like who can play against man, and that's really been a problem because they need somebody. And then I guess going back to my first point is like maybe just call some more shot plays because they're not like or even just like easy like gift completions on bootlegs and stuff like nakeds because they're when they do call play action they're trying to set up in the pocket and just keep him there, and sometimes they'll boot him a little bit, but really just to keep him in the pocket. So yeah, I mean the offense is probably this is probably the offense that it's been the whole year, and Mac just like taking it down a notch in his accuracy has just unraveled, I think, kind of the whole thing.
Yeah. The last question I have before we bump off of this is, in comparison to a team like the Chiefs, right? And the Chiefs, I think, kind of exist in their own silo because of 8 game winning streak, right? There's just a certain recognition we all have to have of what's going on over there. But in comparison to the Chiefs, what is your level of confidence in the Bills right now in terms of like playoff contention? Do you think that they're close
Man,
to the Chiefs? You know, how? Or let me
well,
ask you this: how much of their matchup this season do you think you can actually reliably use as a data point if they were to match up again in the playoffs?
yeah, man, it's tough. I think you can use quite a bit of it to tell you the truth, and it would not. And I think the Bills could beat them. I mean, they're gonna have to go to Arrowhead again, but man, 8 game win streak, and I'm still not sold on them. Sold on
Me
the Chiefs
either.
against a good team. That's my biggest problem. Is like, yeah, you beat the Raiders. Yeah, you beat like the Steelers and the Raiders are like 8-7 teams, or the Steelers are now like 7-1 or something. They're not good teams, man. And especially
Yeah.
defensively, they're not good. So I just
Right.
get worried, like, what are they going to look like versus a really good team? I know they played the Cowboys in the win streak, who I really like, but yeah, the Chiefs just I can't get a feel for are they ever going to reach the ceiling? Which is crazy to think on in an 8 game win streak. Whether you feel that way, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at their win streak every week, and I keep waiting for like, okay, what is the actual win that you're like stamping?
Yes.
Like, okay, that they are real, like they are serious. That's kind of why I kind of framed it as like you just have to recognize the fact that this win streak is happening, right? Because it would be intellectually dishonest to act like they're not winning the games that they're winning consecutively, and I want to pay my respect to that. But when you go through it, it's like I don't think anything of the Giants, and they barely won that game. You get the Packers when Aaron Rodgers is out. You blow up the Raiders twice, and we talked about exactly why they were able to do that. So I don't know how much to credit that. The Cowboys is a legitimate win, and I say that the Chargers is a legitimate win, and the Chargers game is an overtime game, which to me is like I don't know what you take away from that. In terms
Well,
of big
I think the
picture
Chargers
games.
game is like very even, one score game. Now the Chargers defense is bad. We're about to talk about them. Chargers
I
defense
was
is
gonna say,
horrible,
yeah.
and they really. I mean, like, we're never going to talk about these fourth down decisions on this podcast because
I'm
we're
not doing
not
this.
we're
Yeah,
not doing that.
I'm
But
not
like,
doing that.
they hit one of them and they lose the game.
The
The
game is
Chargers hit
over.
one of them and the Chiefs lose the game. So yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah, that's the thing with that win streak is.
the win streak
I
is
like
the
the way
win
you put
streak.
it. Yeah, it is a win
Like,
streak. It's a long win streak. 8 games is a long win streak. It just doesn't feel right for some reason.
yeah,
And yeah, so but the same question to you about like when you look at that Bills Chiefs game from earlier this season, like, do you think that just happens again if they
I
play
will.
each other?
I will say that my feeling going into that game. It's funny, like it's completely turned around now. My feeling going into that game was, I think the Bills are good, and if you told me to blindly pick who could win the AFC, if I take how I feel, all my priors out of the conversation, I'd probably say looking at those two teams that they're even. And my thought was when I include my priors and all the things that we've seen throughout the last few years was that the Chiefs were like the perfect mismatch for the
Yeah,
Bills, right? Because of the way that they play defense, the way that they're able to generate explosive plays, how static the Bills can be defensively, et cetera, et cetera. I think now I almost feel the opposite. I feel like this year that the Bills might be the team that the Chiefs the least want to see because the Bills can score enough points that's going to force the Chiefs to have to be perfect offensively. And I'm still not confident in what the Chiefs are offensively right now. I don't know. Like I think that a lot of the good performances for the Chiefs defense are schedule based. A lot of these are like scheduled performances that have looked good. Again, you give credit to what's happening because we know of plenty of teams that are probably good enough to win games that lose week in and week out. So you don't want to dismiss it out of hand, but when you start talking about beating good opponents, I kind of laid it out. I don't know what to take from this that I can extrapolate into a playoff setting. And when I look at that last matchup, some of the turnovers were bad luck, but a lot of those were bad decisions, and we're still seeing some bad decisions. Like I got to see it. I got to see the Chiefs play good defense first. Let me see them play and beat a good defense, and then we can revisit the conversation. And they might not see a good defense until they play the Bills.
I think on the flip side, going back to when it would be the Bills offense versus the Chiefs defense, I do think that, you've talked about this before. I think you've written about it too. The Chiefs defense has been obviously better with the addition of Melvin Ingram and allowing Chris Jones to go back inside, and again, that plays into the same thing we were talking about earlier, where it's like, well, can you get to him with four? So yeah, I think that I'd have to rewatch the first game of the game earlier this season, but I think that could change things. Obviously, not putting Daniel Sorensen on the field, my favorite player in the league, might help things as well. So I think that they could be better on defense against them. But man, this just goes back to the same thing. If you get Josh at 100%, it's over. You're not winning. Like, that's it. He's just going to score 30 points.
Yeah. And I don't want to be hyperbolic, but as I just look at the AFC picture, I can see plenty of worlds where the Colts can beat the Chiefs. I believe the Bengals can beat the Chiefs. I believe the Bills can beat the Chiefs. I think if they saw the Chargers again, the Chargers could beat the Chiefs. I'm not sold. And again, it's really not even an indictment on Kansas City as much as it is how wide open the AFC is. They're just not a cut above right now. Part of that is just some attrition, and we've talked about it throughout the season, right? These are the prices that you pay to be good forever. You want to be good forever? Being good forever means that you're not going to be the greatest thing that we've ever seen year in and year out. So the Chiefs can win the AFC. It's not me saying that they can't. And them finishing out what looks to be like as a number one overall seed is going to be their best. It's their best advantage this season by far. But yeah, I think that I don't have any reason to believe that any of the teams I named could not go into Arrowhead and win, because we've seen some of these teams go into Arrowhead and beat them.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Let's turn our attention to the Chargers. Before we do that, I just want to remind you guys that if you go on PFF.com right now, put in the promo code that I'm looking up right now, which is ELITEUP, ELITEUP. You can get a 50% PFF Elite annual subscription, 50, half off. You can get all the locked article content. I wrote an article about Joe Burrow. That's on the website right now, I believe. PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards, NFL Green Line, College Green Line. By the way, NFL Green Line is up 27 units this season. College Green Line is up 32 units this season. 0 to 100 grades of every single player, player prop tools, all that stuff. That's ELITEUP, 50% off for an entire year of PFF Elite. Okay, let's talk about those Chargers, because they lost to the Houston Texans. And I think the offense is probably going to be fine. I didn't have a good rewatch of Herbert, but I think his grade was fine. So whatever.
I can tell you from having watched the game as it was broadcasted that there really wasn't anything wrong with Herbert. I will say that the biggest issue to me was the fact that obviously not having all of their entire stable of receivers and not having Austin Eckler. What that hurt was what we've seen since the bye week, which is all the downhill runs setting up the vertical play action shots. Like Houston, very clearly, because they did not have to respect the entire width of the field, was able to get a ton of depth and take away some of those shots. So it took them basically until the fourth quarter, where their whole offense was basically in 2-minute mode, to be able to find a rhythm. But I don't know if to me, that wasn't an indictment on Herbert. Everything outside of that really ugly pick six at the end of the fourth quarter, in the middle of the fourth quarter, I thought was just kind of like regular quarterback trying to drive through, a slog of an offense.
So if we think that the Chargers offense is probably going to be fine with people coming back, I think we're on the same page there. We have to talk about the Chargers defense, which again just gets absolutely run over. And the first thing I'll say is, like, rewatching this type of film is hilarious to me, because you're just like, what is going on? Let's talk about, Brandon Staley and his defense, because I think that the more I rewatched it, I'm like, I don't care what defense you were playing. You could play the 46 Bear. It's not going to matter if you don't have players on the interior, and they are horrible right now on the interior, both on defensive line and at linebacker. And they had to play Kenneth Murray at edge the whole game, which like that wasn't good. So
I mean, the guy struggles to be a great linebacker, so you know.
So
putting the guy at the edge ain't gonna be the answer.
So I'm like looking at this and I'm just like, man, because even if you're spinning a safety down and playing with like in a one high world, you know, at the end of the day, some people are going to get double teamed on your defensive line in the interior, right, no matter what. Guess what? You can't get pushed back 5 yards every time.
Correct.
Like I don't care if there's two safeties, one safety, you're playing bare, like you're playing all the light box stuff like that. Like you cannot get pushed back when you're double teams, and that was happening the whole game. And obviously my priors are that Staley's a really good football coach and blah 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 blah. He knows how to coach a defense, so maybe that's clouding my judgment. But when I watch these interior players get beat time and time again by an okay. Like individually made up of individuals on the Houston offensive line that are not great. Like
I was going to say,
you're just not going to ever stop the run.
Is generous. Even calling them okay as a rushing offense is generous.
It's like then you have like Drew Tranquill. Now I actually wanted to ask you this because they got beat on like duo a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So duo is the run that everyone talks about now. It's a very popular run. I heard Drew Brees call it America's run on the Notre Dame broadcast. Actually, like
I don't hate that idea.
I mean, like it.
Everybody is doing it.
So duo is they call it power without pullers, and really the whole idea is wherever you can get a double team based on their defensive front, and you usually do this with a tight end, at least one tight end, usually two tight ends, and sometimes even a bunch of tight ends, or like two tight ends and a receiver. And so the idea is within that, wherever we can get a double team, we're going to try our best to stay on that double team as long as possible and not get up into the linebacker until we absolutely have to, you know, split off as like if I'm talking about like me, a center and a guard double teaming on one technique. We're going to double team that one technique until the absolute last minute that one of us has to come off and actually block the Mike linebacker per se. So that's happening. And the linebackers, one of the things that teams can do against duo schemes on defense is the linebacker can trigger fast. Because if the linebacker triggers fast, then it triggers the offensive lineman to say, okay, well, we can't double anymore, so one of us has to come off. But I'm watching the way that actually it was both, because it was Drew Tranquill and the guy that put in the backup 33, I think. And I'm watching them take on blocks like this. But you are Drew Tranquill. Like, you're not a power player.
No.
So you coming down and saying, okay, I want to trigger fast, I get it. No problem with that. But then you coming down, triggering fast, and then just getting absorbed by an offensive lineman? Like,
yeah.
What is the point of that?
Yeah,
like
being a blocking dummy.
Like, dude, like, get around the guy. Like, he just tries to, like, put him up and, like, shock and shit. Like, I'm gonna lock my arms out and I'm gonna try and make a play. And it's like, you're cooked. Like, you're just not that type of player. And of course, while this is happening, the nose is getting driven back into him as well. But I saw them do this, and then I couldn't understand it. They allowed a big play on a counter run where the defensive end spilled it. So that what they did was it was a counter with two pullers, and the defensive end came inside and he forced the running back to bubble out, which is what you want to do. And then the linebacker to that side, I think it was Tranquill again, just like triggers so slowly. And now, even though they do a good, like they kind of do the thing they're supposed to do where it bounces out, the second puller comes around, it was like the tight end. The second, he comes around and he has the ability now, even though he had to move around in the backfield a bit on his pull path, he can turn his shoulders and get upfield because you haven't attacked the line of scrimmage yet. So it's like, to me, that might be a coaching thing, but at the end of the day, they do not have the players. Without Joey Bosa on the field, without Derwin James on the field, they do not have the players to stop the run consistently in the NFL, period.
So actually, I'm glad you brought up the duo thing. I'm going to get into the weeds for a quick second about duo specifically because I do think that this is kind of emblematic of some of exposing the issues that they have as a run defense. So they did play a good amount of single high, especially when Houston got into heavier sets, right? But they like to do something very specific when they get into single high, and they rotate strong, meaning wherever the most bodies are is where they're dropping the safety to. Now, this makes a lot of sense, right? Like this should make a lot of logical sense in your head. So if you see three receivers or two tight ends and a receiver on one side, you're going to roll a safety down to that side, right? Because what that allows you to do is put your speed players where they have speed players, right? Like that's the idea. When you're getting duo, this makes a lot of sense if you're trying to take away the ball bouncing out to the edge, right? So that the way you hit duo, running back is running right to the A gap like you would in power or an A gap power. And if the linebacker is fitting him head on, he's running through the A gap, he's going to put his inside foot in the ground, bounce to the outside, and now you're trying to force this corner to make a one-on-one tackle, right? As a secondary run force player. So if you're strong side rotating, what you're basically saying is that you're not getting the bounce. Or if you bounce it, you're not getting to the corner because the safety is going to be right in front of him, helping us out in run support. Now, what does that do? It puts you in a situation defensively where your two inside backers, so your weak side linebacker and your Mike backer, have to do what's called falling back. So they're basically responsible for a gap and a half. I'm sure that you guys have heard, if you listen to Brandon Staley's interview with us, you may have heard this come up.
on on the PFF College Football
Right.
Podcast.
You may have heard, or you may have read Ted Wynn's athletic piece about Staley and what they like to do defensively. People have talked about this within the 3-4 for years and years and years, right? So a lot of you guys may be familiar with this, but what that does, that strong side rotation does, it means that your inside linebackers, if the ball bends back away from all the bodies, they have to bend back with the ball. So it's set to saying with these linebackers who are patting their feet, playing tentatively, and then trying to like stack and press these guards that are up on them, that's a problem because you actually have to fall back with the ball. So you'll see Rex Burkhead, he's squeezing the A gap, and then he cuts it back to the weak side, which is not something you usually see in duo. But there's a space available now that's not being fit because all of the Chargers' bodies are tilted so strong to the strong side. So it took them basically until like the fourth quarter to start weak side rotating, meaning that the safety away from the bunch from all the receivers is coming down. Now we want to talk about like structurally how you want to fit duo. That's a more ideal way to do it because the player who's taking that space that Burkhead was killing them with, snap after snap after snap, that guy has depth and he can see it as it's happening. So he can play a gap and a half, quote unquote, a little bit easier that way. And to me, like if you can't do it with strong side rotation, that means that you don't have good enough players, is basically what I'm trying to get at. Your inside linebackers aren't good enough because they're trying to do everything they can to keep those guys clean or get out of double team situations. You've talked about this before. You've written about this before in terms of how teams are playing too high safeties and trying to get as many guys at the line of scrimmage as possible. Even when they're rolling down, they're playing with 5 guys at the line of scrimmage, and you got a safety rolling down into the box as well against these heavier looks. So technically, everybody should be in a one-on-one with this kind of spacing defensively, but you actually got to win the one-on-one for that to matter. Or you got to have guys coming from different layers or levels so that way the one-on-one blocks aren't as lethal to your defense. They weren't able to get that, and that's a big reason why they had so much trouble. It was almost like snap after snap after snap of duo where the ball is just bending back and there's nobody home. And then you get my favorite snap of maybe all time in terms of run fits, which is the Chargers finally call a run blitz. They get a run through. Rex Burkhead is dead to rights. He makes the guy miss. Everybody else did their job. And now Burkhead's out the gate on the backside for like a 30-yard gain in the second half. And that was like the final nail in the coffin of the game. So that was really emblematic of what their issues are in terms of why they don't have the bodies yet to execute the scheme. And there's really not another schematic answer. Like I know people think that there's a magic adjustment you can make in these situations. I don't think that there's that right now. There's no way to hide their issues at the moment.
Yeah, and I thought, well, the one thing I'll say is that I did think that even though they did allow that big run when they got the run through, like you just talked about, they did have a little more success when they just said, "Screw it, we're gonna try and move people.
Right.
We're gonna slant this way and send a linebacker. We're gonna slant that way and send a linebacker.
Yeah.
Try something." But like, even like I was watching Kenneth Murray, and I'm like, if you played in like Gus Bradley's system, let's say, for example, and you said, "Okay, Kenneth Murray, I know you don't play edge a lot, but here you go. We have nobody else. Go play it. You're a C-gap defender pretty much, every snap that you're going to play. That's it. That's your job. Stay in the C-gap. Don't let anything come outside of you, and that's it." But like, you see this one snap where they're playing with a light box. The run goes into a B-gap, which is actually like the safety is the B-gap player from depth. So a lot of times, I don't know if the Chargers are doing this, but you talk about this gap and a half stuff where it's like, oftentimes teams will tell that defensive end, like, "Hey, look, you are right next to the open B gap, and that open B gap is manned by a safety at 20 yards or like 15 yards or 10 yards or whatever."
Yep.
As opposed to a linebacker who's sitting there in the B gap. Like, if the ball is coming to you, to your side, you're getting blocked like directly on by the tackle. Hey, try work your way inside,
right,
so that there's no gap there. And then the ball has to stop, like the running back has to stop his feet and come to the outside, and then it allows the safety to go make a play, or the corner, if he's getting cracked, to go make a play. And
right.
you see it where Murray just plays the block like they're in this situation, like exactly like a detailed, and Murray just kind of plays the block like he does, and the ball can go straight through the B gap and gone. It's gone. Yeah. So like it's like tough because like you don't have the players for that. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe they didn't tell him. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's just tough. And I guess the question comes back to kind of what we're saying. Like, are you concerned now with the Chargers overall going forward?
They just better pray like hell they don't see the Patriots or Colts. If they see one of those two teams, season's over. It's that simple. And like not having Durham. It's so funny, again, to the point of good players. It cracks me up sometimes to see just how much, even in the NFL, what a great player covers up for you defensively. And what Bosa and Derwin James does for this defense is basically the only two like actually really good defenders that they have. Like, they make up for so much ground that their teammates lose, that the second one of those guys aren't there, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I get it. All that strong side rotation stuff looks great. When it's 33 rolling down into the box, you can do that all day. When it's him, all the stuff that they're doing with Nwosu and Bosa and trading who's doing what on the edge, that looks awesome when Bosa is involved and when Nwosu's 100%. When those guys aren't there, it looks a little different. So yeah, this to me it's structural. It's structural, but it's not schematic, if that makes sense. This is about like how you go about building a defense and what it looks like when the defense is in the process of being built. And to your point, and this is obviously tied to the conversations that we've had ad nauseum about defense and the future of it in football. You mentioned Gus Bradley, right? Like, if you have a Gus Bradley, that game actually probably doesn't go like that. Because to your point, you're gonna tell a Kenneth Murray, hey, you're a C-gap defender. I don't care what else happens. You're just gonna tear off up the field. If they don't block you, you just fly down the line of scrimmage until you make contact with something. You could probably live with that, in a 1-game sample size that way. Or, if you're anybody off that Carroll tree, even if you're more blitz heavy, you can say, hey, we're going to play fire zone all day. It is what it is. We're just going to get after these guys. If they tear down the field with play action passes, then that's going to be what it's going to be. You could do that as well. But they're trying to build out something very specific, the style of 3-4 that we see, from the Joe Barrys, from Brandon Staley, from Vic Fangio, from Sean Desai, et cetera, all the guys off this tree. It requires a very specific skill set out of very specific players. And it is just painfully obvious that what they have between the B gaps right now just ain't going to get it done. It's not even close right now. It's not even close.
I don't want to just, but like, it's bad. It's really bad. And we've said it's bad for a long time. They just get doubled and they get beat into submission. Okay, let's move on to a team that we talked about last week that we were having problems with, the Arizona Cardinals. And guess what? They continue to have problems. Let's talk about them a bit. I don't know. We're going to end up rehashing a lot of stuff we said last week because this is really how we feel about what's going on there in Arizona. So the first thing is, because we talked about this before we started recording, is their drop off in play as the season has gone on for 3 straight years now. So I looked this up. Kyler Murray before week 13 for 2019, 2020, 2021, 86.3 PFF grade. Kyler Murray in games after week 13, 64.5 PFF grade. So now, I think the obvious example for me is the almost like theory for me is the same thing that we hear from some other offenses of the past or some other current offenses, which is like they don't have enough.
Right.
So as the season goes on, where are you fooling defenses if you're just showing the same thing all the time? And I think that Cliff generally does a good job of creating some good concepts and stuff like that.
Honestly, there's an argument to be made that he might be better at hiding the holes on his roster than almost anybody else right now in the NFL. Like he's been so good at configuring these weird personnel packages and formations out of these personnel packages to hide the fact that they have like some glaring holes in how they do things offensively. But yeah, to your point, I mean, this is a common theme now, right? We're talking about teams hitting their ceilings. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Like they can't hide. When you're watching them offensively, what is the gap? What is the hole that they don't have enough of?
Well, I mean, I'll say that I don't like have enough of a wealth of knowledge of their offenses in 2019 and 2020 to really give you that like, oh, this is exactly why they keep falling. But I know that in the last 3 weeks, they haven't had DeAndre Hopkins, and they did not have Rodney Hudson this past weekend. And maybe it's 2 weekends in a row, I'm not sure. Hudson is super important as a center because I don't know this for sure. I'm going to assume this, and I think I'm right. Hudson makes all the calls on the offensive line. We would agree? Like, from what you know, Hudson makes the calls. So all of a sudden, you're changing that. Like, and I don't know if Kyler Murray is doing that. And their protections can be pretty bad at times. And when you're being a 5-man protection team, if you're not right a lot with your calls and who's slotting to who, man, that's tough. So you don't have Rodney Hudson there. You end up in situations where Kyler Murray gonna have to scramble a lot. Well, he's very good, but it's not always going to be pretty. We talked about this with Josh Allen. Like sometimes you're going to get outside, you're going to have a game where you get outside the pocket and it ain't there for you. And that happens a lot to Kyler Murray. So there's that. And then it's kind of the stuff that I talked about last week with not having DeAndre Hopkins is because of the way they set their offense up. So when the Cowboys lost Michael Gallup, I think this is a good example. They could just rearrange and say, okay, well, we can play someone else at X who was already going to be on the field anyways. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. And we'll rearrange it. Maybe we'll do this differently. Maybe we'll do that differently. And we'll just try and we can figure this out. When DeAndre Hopkins goes down, they don't say, okay, well, let's move AJ Green to X. Or let's maybe more condensed formation so like we can get like Christian Kirk there or maybe we can have some plays where we get a smaller guy playing outside, like Rondale Moore or Kirk or an Isabella, something like that. They just say, okay, well, this is our X position. Who's the next X player? Antoine Wesley. And even more than that, it's who is the next left wide receiver? Outside receiver.
Really, yes.
Because AJ Green plays on the right. So now it's like, okay, well, Antoine Wesley is not a bad player, and he has played well the last 2 weeks, and he caught a touchdown on a 9 route. against the Colts. But he's like, Hopkins is going to go and get you 12 targets. You're just not going to throw the ball that much to Antoine Wesley.
You shouldn't.
So
honestly.
then you shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So like, what's left for the offense when that player is down? That guy who just wins all the one-on-ones in that offense. You don't have a way to create offense without it. And that's been concerning. They get Hopkins back. They get Hudson back. Man, I like this team as much as anybody. But without those two, you're going to have problems. And it's going to cost them the division.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when I first started the rewatch for this game, the first thing I thought was, man, I'm going to see the stuff that I've been talking about with this team defensively since the beginning of the year, right? Which is like they just can't do anything to actually stop an offense like the Colts. But really, I liked what their approach was, that they were just going to try to play in the backfield as often as possible. And they got a lot of run-throughs on runs and passes. I think that if I remember right, the Colts had like 126 yards rushing and 133 of them were after contact, to kind of give you an idea of how often Arizona was able to create havoc in the backfield. So that's a credit to what they were doing. Now, if you're playing like that, especially against an offensive coordinator like Frank Reich, who's going to get into these bunches and these stacks and get in these condensed situations, you can't play man. That is the hallmark. That is the other half of the hallmark of this defense, that you want to play as tight as possible in coverage and then just try to get guys in the backfield and play for mistakes. Well, when you're playing against a team that can run the ball the way that the Colts can, and that can get into all these different that can create these different formational issues for you, you're going to play a little bit more tentatively because you don't want guys getting rubbed or getting out leveraged, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now what you're telling me is you're playing soft single high zone, basically, and you're draining out the coverage by sending guys on blitzes. Well, if you're telling that to a quarterback who I might not even be all that fond of in Carson Wentz, but if you're telling me that you're going to give a veteran quarterback, a guy on, his second, going on his way to his third contract, basically, that he gets to look at that picture, that day one install type of picture, he's going to cut you up. And that's what happened. He only needed 15 completions to to have a great day, basically, against this defense. And a lot of it is like, it's not coverage bus. It's guys in decent coverage spots, but the ball is just going to where the coverage is weakest because of leverage or because of depth or, because of the matchup with the running back or a tight end on a linebacker, or a screen where you get these yards after catch opportunities. So defensively, I feel okay about who they are. And maybe this is just kind of like my own vision of the game that kind of biases me, because I don't think that they're particularly I don't think that they're not talented. They're not that great defensively. But I have a hard time looking at a defense that's as aggressive as them and not believing that they can get a 3 turnover game against a team that I probably picked them to lose to in a playoff setting, and they end up winning that game because, again, they're playing for variance on both sides of the ball. My concern is more along the lines of what you were mentioning, which is, A, what we've said for the last 3 weeks, which is so much being on Kyler Murray's shoulders as a quarterback, and a lot of that stemming from the structure of the offense. And when you don't have a guy, to your point, to add on to what you were saying, like a DeAndre Hopkins, that's a guy who's a ball winner no matter what the coverage shell is, no matter whether it's man or zone, no matter whether, you're bracketing the guy or whatever. When you have a guy in this offense, that's amazing. The second that you lose him, now not only are you telling your quarterback, hey, you're going to have to create if he's being doubled, now you actually have to figure out everything that's happening with the other 21 pieces on the field. That's a lot of information to take in for a guy like Kyler Murray. And I think that shows in some of the issues that he has in the second half of the year. As the attrition of a season goes on, because they're still so disjointed. I don't understand how a team that can run for basically 150 yards the way that they did against the Colts has like a 16% play action rate. And that's counting RPOs in that as well. That can't happen to me.
And I bet you looked it up by personnel grouping, you would find some pretty big tells.
Absolutely, 100%. And that
they bring a guy in the backfield, a tight end, a fullback, right, whatever
big body.
Guess what's happening?
Exactly. So, to me, again, hitting a ceiling. They're starting to run. They're running out of punches to throw. And the more that they run out of these punches to throw, the more it puts on the shoulders of a Kyler Murray. And I just have my concerns that if a team is even able to get contact on the guy, get these knockdowns, get these QB hits, it's not so much like injury risk. I don't care about the fact that the guy is short and a little bit frail. Like that, I mean, any quarterback can be knocked out of a game. It's more like if that element of his game becomes mitigated or taken away by a team that is all in on taking that away, I have concerns if you don't have a Hopkins that can go get you 160 yards on 13, 14, 15 targets available to you. That's really kind of where I'm at. I just don't know what the next counterpunch is. I don't think that they have one, to be honest with you, with the way that this whole thing has been set up.
But I think like when they're healthy, the scheme and personnel meet
I don't
each
want to.
other.
Yeah, I don't want to see them when they're 100% healthy. I don't want to see that team.
I don't think there's a better player for that position, that left wide receiver X position, than DeAndre Hopkins in the league. 100%. And we've talked about this before. Like, we talked about it last week with Davante Adams. Like, who's the best receiver in the league? And I think the conclusion we kind of came to was, like, Davante Adams. There's no one better than Davante Adams, but there might be guys who are like DeAndre Hopkins who are at his level, right? But you wouldn't put any of them higher than you. That would be fucking stupid. Right. But like Hopkins is so specifically perfect. He's such a great one-on-one player, and you put him out as wide as possible. Yep. That means, and we talked about this a lot. The wider you go, the more one-on-ones you get. There it is, right? There it is. He doesn't play in the slot. You can't double him that way. You know, you have to play with, if you really want to double him, you really got to show that you're doubling him.
Exactly. You got to unwind the whole defense to get that safety over the top.
And he's such a perfect player for that. And then honestly, on the right wide receiver, AJ Green's kind of the perfect player for that too, that they've gotten this year, right?
I mean, even having Ertz as their tight end, as part of their tight end room, I'm like, man, there's some throws that they're making to him. And I'm like, wow, I forgot that he could even do that. Because he hasn't even been in a situation where he's been allowed to be the additional piece and not be the main guy. So they have a lot of the pieces, but again, this offense ain't like the Packers, right? If this was LaFleur calling plays and I knew that like there's no telling where these guys will line up, I might feel a little bit differently. Or, there's going to be an investment in building out this versatility in play calling out of these different personnel packages.
Well, okay, let's go. You put LaFleur as the head coach now of the Cardinals, but you still don't have Hopkins.
Still don't have Hopkins.
Well, what do you think it looks like?
I think it looks a lot like last year in Green Bay, which is like the force feed touches to your guys that can go to a Rondale Moore. He basically takes the whole Davante Adams bubble package, right? Like you get that guy 8-10 touches a game. And you manufacture your offense that way. They have what they have in James Conner and honestly the rest of their running back room and what they've been able to do creatively. Very good. With all the zone read stuff, all the pullers that you can get, guys on the move, these multiple tight end sets. Like that's right up the alley of a LaFleur as well. It's more like, okay, you're marrying all that up. And now all of a sudden you get your Zach Ertz in the intermediate area off of play action. You get those design shots to an AJ Green when you know that you've got him in a condensed split, and he's going to cross the field and nobody's going to be able to run with that guy. That's the kind of stuff where it's like, that's the piece. I want to see that. I would like to see that. Not so much because it's like an instant offense, flip the switch and everything's all good, but having that layer in your offense. I mean, that kind of stuff has basically been getting Kirk Cousins by in Minnesota for the last 3 seasons. Like you have to, there comes a point in time where you kind of have to have it. And they are in desperate need of it right now, because I think if you had that, you're able to take just 5% of this offense off the shoulders of its quarterback. It would work wonders for them in this time of year. But I have my concerns if they're not playing at home in a playoff setting, whether or not this high variance we're playing on tilt the whole game actually turns out in their favor.
And, talking about that is, I wrote this article about Burrow this morning where it's like the opposite is happening there. Whereas they are a spread offense They want to run 11 personnel. They want to spread it out. They want to show you all this empty stuff, though they've kind of calmed down a bit with their empty stuff. But the big difference of the last 2 months, as Burrow has, and they've won a bunch of games and been good on offense, is like Burrow is starting to make plays again as a one-on-one player.
Right.
Like whereas Kyler Murray was doing this stuff early in the season that he wasn't doing in 2020 and 2021 and 2019, where he was making plays out of structure. Burrow, like now, Kyler Murray, that's dried up a bit. Burrow has whatever magic you get there was. Burrow has taken it, and if you're going to be this spread team, like the Bills, like the Bengals, like the Cardinals, and kind of three different ways in how they want to do it. You got to be able to make plays out of structure with your quarterback has to be able to make plays out of structure. He has to be a one-on-one player. He has to win the one-on-ones when there's a rusher on him. And especially with the Bengals, with the bad offensive line, like there's going to be problems there. And he's been making the most out of those opportunities. Whereas I don't know if Kyler is making the most out of those opportunities. And then with all the injuries, it's just unraveling in front of our eyes. They're going to make the playoffs. I think they're probably already clinched, I would imagine.
I could believe they have clinched at least a wild card at this point. So, before we go, I kind of want to wrap on this question. So we have 5 teams in the NFC that have double-digit wins: the Rams, the Cardinals, the Cowboys, the Packers, and the Buccaneers. Which of those teams can the Cardinals beat, if any, as currently constructed?
Oh boy. Well,
we'll say neutral site. We'll say neutral site as well.
We're saying Hopkins is available and Hudson's available.
Yeah, we can say all teams at full strength.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams, they've had success against the Rams. Probably like them. And I also think on the other side of the field, which quarterback you want to match up against?
Yeah.
Probably like Stafford.
Right.
Because he might throw you the ball a couple times.
Yeah, of that crop, yeah, I probably want to see Stafford the most. I mean, and again, not even really a shot against Stafford. You're just talking about Dak Prescott, who's looked like the best quarterback in the NFL this year. You have the greatest quarterback of all time, and you've got maybe the third, one of the top 5 best quarterbacks of all time in this conversation as well.
Yeah, that would scare me. Speaking of Dak, just so happened that, I don't know if you remember this, but on the podcast last week, we said, don't worry about the Cowboys offense. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it was so obvious for me to see when I turned the tape on that whatever issues they had the last month, it was never going to continue. It was just never going to continue. Now the Washington's defense is fucking bad. But still, that 56 points like that. I was saying,
56 points don't just happen in the NFL.
Doesn't just happen.
Not only does it not just happen, if the Cowboys wanted to keep the gas down, they could have put up 70 if they really wanted to.
All right. The Too High Podcast is brought to you by Western and Southern. Want a chance to win the ultimate game day feast, whether it's football success or financial savvy? Winning starts with asking us questions. Would you like to know what it's like behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Every submission earns you a chance to win the ultimate feast to celebrate football's favorite Sunday. We'll cover your catering up to $2,500, coordinate your order from a restaurant near you, and have it delivered on February 13, 2022. And don't forget to check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that is westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, with Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. And before we get out of here, just our heartfelt condolences to our friend Justice Mosqueda, because we haven't talked about him this episode, and I just need to get him in there because it wouldn't be a Too High episode without us making fun of Justice. Yep. All right.
Yep. Seth may love you. I don't. See you guys.